For 22 years, my own family called me the failure, the one who dropped out, the one who never made anything of herself, the one they seated at the far end of the table, the way you set down a chair you don't really need. My brother Daniel had the big house, my sister Renee had the title and the suits, and me, I had a small apartment, an old car, and a silence nobody ever asked about. They thought they knew exactly who I was. Then 3 weeks ago, a hospital clerk slid a yellowed folder across a counter, a folder that was never supposed to be opened, and everything they believed about me came apart in a single afternoon. Because the record showed where I'd been the year everyone said I gave up, and what I gave up to be there. Stay with me. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I stayed quiet for 2 decades, and you'll have to decide for yourself whether silence like that deserves forgiveness, or whether it was already too late. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 52 years old, and for most of my life I answered to a name no one said out loud but everyone meant. Failure. It started at a dinner table when I was 30. Renee had just made junior partner. Daniel had just closed on a house with a driveway longer than the street I grew up on, and my father, God, I can still see his face, lifted his glass to them both and said, "At least two of my children listened." He didn't look at me when he said it, he never had to. The whole room knew the third child, the one who'd left nursing school in her final year, the one who came back from that year thinner, quieter, and somehow smaller. Nobody ever asked me why I left. That's the part people don't understand. They didn't ask, they decided. She couldn't handle the pressure, Renee would say. She always quit things, Daniel would add. And I would sit there and let it land, because the truth was a door I had promised someone I would never open. I want you to understand something before this story goes any further. I wasn't weak. I wasn't lazy. I finished every shift I ever worked. I just stopped explaining myself to people who had already finished writing my story without me. But here's the question that haunted me for 22 years, the one I need you to hold on to. If I just told them the truth back then, would any of this have happened? The call came on a Tuesday. My father had collapsed. Heart. He was 78, stubborn, and had spent the last 2 decades making sure I knew exactly where I ranked. And still, when the phone rang, I was in my car before I'd even found my shoes. That's the part nobody tells you about being the failure of the family. You're the first one they call when something breaks. You're just never the one they thank when it's fixed. The hospital was the county one on Marlowe Street. I knew the building. I knew it better than anyone in my family could have guessed, though I didn't know that mattered yet. Daniel was already in the waiting room, pacing in a coat that cost more than my month's rent. Renee arrived 20 minutes later, phone pressed to her ear, mid-negotiation even then. And when she finally hung up, the first thing she said to me wasn't, "How is he?" It was, "Try not to make this about you, Claire." I almost laughed. 22 years, and she still thought I was the one who made things about me. We sat, we waited, the fluorescent lights hummed, and then a nurse came out, older, kind eyes, the kind of face that has delivered bad news so many times it's learned how to soften it. She looked at the three of us. Then her eyes stopped on me, and something flickered across her face. Recognition. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Have we? Do I know you from somewhere?" And I felt the floor tilt, just a little, because I knew exactly where she knew me from. And I knew that if she said one more sentence, the door I'd kept shut for 22 years was going to swing wide open in front of the only two people I'd spent my whole life hiding it from. I cut her off, quickly, maybe too quickly. "I think you're mistaking me for someone," I said. She held my eyes a second longer than was comfortable. Nurses are like that. They read the body before they read the words. She gave a small nod, the kind that means I'll let you keep your secret, but we both know I'm right, and told us my father was stable, sedated. We could see him in the morning. Renee and Daniel left for a hotel. Of course they did. I stayed in the waiting room, because that's what the failure does. She stays. Around 2 in the morning, the nurse came back with 2 paper cups of bad coffee and sat down beside me like we'd known each other for years. "You were on the 4th floor," she said quietly. "Transplant recovery. A long time ago." I was a junior nurse then. I never forget the long-term ones. I didn't answer. "You were younger than the others," she went on. "And you were the only one who came in alone. Every single day. No family. No flowers. Just you." The coffee shook in my hands. "I always wondered what happened to you," she said. "You just disappeared one day. And that's when the second loop tightens. because I need you to understand what she was describing. A young woman, transplant recovery, alone. The exact same year my family says I dropped out of nursing school because I couldn't handle it. They thought I'd run away from my life. I hadn't run anywhere. I'd been right here, on the fourth floor, recovering from something none of them ever knew about. The next morning, I went to medical records to update my father's contact information. A small, boring task, the kind they always handed to me. The clerk was young and overworked. She typed in our family name to pull my father's file, Bennett, and frowned. "There's an old archived record under this name, too," she said. "Want me to flag it as a duplicate, or is it a relative?" "What kind of record?" I asked. She squinted at the screen. "Living donor file, sealed mostly. Confidential, from," she scrolled, "22 years ago." My heart stopped, because I knew that file. I was that file, and I'd spent 22 years making absolutely certain that no one in my family would ever connect those two words, living donor, to my name. "I'll take it," I heard myself say. "It's mine." She printed the cover sheet, slid it across the counter in a yellowed folder soft at the corners from age, and just as my fingers touched it, of course, because the universe has a cruel sense of timing, I heard Renee's heels on the tile behind me. "Claire, what's taking so long? What is that?" I turned. The folder was in my hand, and on the cover sheet, in plain printed letters anyone could read, were the words that were never supposed to reach my family. Donor, recipient. And a date. Renee took the folder out of my hands the way she took everything, like it was already hers to take. I could have stopped her. 22 years of practice had made me very good at stopping people from learning things. But I was tired. You reach an age where the lie weighs more than the truth ever could, and I had crossed that line somewhere in the waiting room the night before. So I let her read it. I watched her eyes move down the page. I watched the exact moment her face changed, the small crack, the recalculation, the realization that the story she'd told about her sister for 2 decades had a missing chapter. "Living donor," she read. Her voice had lost its edge. "Kidney. Recipient." She stopped. Because the recipient had a name on that page, and the name was Daniel Bennett. Our brother. Renee looked up at me, and for the first time in my entire life she had no idea what to say. "Daniel had a kidney transplant?" she whispered. "When?" We never." 22 years ago," I said. "He was 26. You were in law school in another state. He told everyone he was traveling." "And the donor?" She looked at the page again, like the letters might rearrange themselves. "It just says anonymous living donor. Claire, why do you have this file?" I didn't answer with words. I just pulled back my sleeve and showed her the scar I'd hidden under long sleeves at every family dinner for 22 years. "Here's what really happened the year they all say I gave up. Daniel was dying. Kidney failure, fast and quiet, the kind that doesn't make the news in a family. He was 26, and terrified and too proud to tell our parents how bad it had gotten. He came to me, not Renee, not Dad, me because I was the one in nursing school, the one who'd understand without panicking. "Don't tell them," he begged me. "Dad's heart can't take it. Mom will fall apart. Please, Claire, let me handle it." So I got tested quietly. I was a match, a rare one, and I made a choice. I gave him my kidney in the spring of my final year. The recovery had complications, an infection, then a second surgery, then months I couldn't stand without help. I missed my clinical hours. I missed my exams. By the time my body came back to me, my place in the program was gone. I didn't drop out because I couldn't handle the pressure. I dropped out because I was lying in a hospital bed on the fourth floor, alone, healing from the operation that kept my brother alive. And here is the part that cut the deepest, the part I've never said out loud until now. Daniel asked me to keep it secret. "Just until Dad's stronger," he said. "Then I'll tell everyone what you did. I promise." He never told them. The years passed. He got better. He got rich. He got comfortable. And somewhere along the way, it became easier for him to let me be the family failure than to admit he was alive because of the sister he let everyone look down on, the forgotten promise. That was the one that nearly broke me. Not the surgery, the promise. Renee called Daniel. I heard her voice shaking through the phone. Renee, who never shook. He came to the hospital within the hour. I think part of him already knew. You can carry a secret for 22 years, but you can't carry it forever, and some part of Daniel must have always known the bill would come due. He walked into that records hallway and saw the folder in Renee's hands and the scar on my arm, and he stopped dead. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the nurse, the same one, the one with the kind eyes, walked past, recognized him from the file photo clipped inside, and said the thing that ended it. Mr. Bennett, your donor never registered for the recognition program. We always wondered why. Most families throw a celebration. She smiled, not knowing what she was detonating. You're lucky. A direct living match like that, your sister gave you decades. Your sister, the words hung in the air. Daniel's face folded. 48 years old, and he cried like the 26-year-old who'd once begged me to keep him alive and keep it quiet. I was going to tell them, he said. I kept thinking, next year, when it's the right time, and then it was easier to. He couldn't finish. Easier to let me be the failure, I said, quietly, not cruelly, just true. He nodded, because there was nothing else honest left to do. Here's what surprised even me. I didn't want an apology in front of the whole family. I didn't want Dad to wake up and finally praise me. I didn't want Renee's guilt or Daniel's tears. For 22 years, I thought I wanted to be proven right, to stand up at one of those dinners and slam the truth on the table and watch their faces. But standing in that hallway, I realized I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, and underneath the tired, relief. Because the secret was never protecting Daniel anymore. Somewhere along the line, it had started protecting their version of me, the small, quiet failure at the end of the table. And carrying that version had cost me more than the kidney ever did. I didn't hate you, I told Daniel. I just got tired of proving I mattered to people who'd already decided I didn't. That was the whole thing. 22 years in one sentence. My father woke up the next morning. Daniel told him everything, every detail, no softening, no right time. I stood in the doorway and watched my 78-year-old father learn that the child he toasted last had been the reason the child he toasted first was still breathing. He didn't say much, he's not a man who knows how, but he reached for my hand, the arm with the scar, and he held it, and he wept. And for the first time in my life, I let him. We didn't become a perfect family. I want to be honest with you, because you've come this far. 22 years of being called a failure doesn't dissolve in one hospital hallway. Renee still talks too fast. Daniel still doesn't always know what to say. My father is still my father, but some things changed for good. Daniel finally registered the truth, officially, on paper, the recognition he'd withheld for 2 decades. Not for a celebration. He did it because he said he never wanted another record to exist in this world that erased what I'd done. Renee asked me, actually asked me, for the first time in her life, what did you give up, Claire? Not just the kidney, the rest of it. Tell me. And I did, and she listened. That was new. And me? I went back to school. 52 years old, sitting in a classroom of people half my age, finishing the degree I'd set down on the fourth floor of a hospital 22 years ago. Not to prove anything to them, to finish something I'd started for the right reasons, the first time. The name they gave me, failure. I gave it back. I don't answer it anymore. So let me leave you with the question I've been carrying since that hospital hallway. I stayed silent for 22 years to protect someone who let me be punished for it. I was finally seen, but only by accident, only because a folder got pulled by mistake. If that folder had never been opened, I might have gone to my grave as the family failure, and the people who loved me would never have known the truth. So I'm asking you, if you were Claire, would you have kept the secret? And after all those years of silence, did Daniel deserve to be forgiven? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Because I spent 22 years not being heard, and I'm not going to let anyone else feel that way if I can help it.